Mm. You always got everything. This is just what you owed me. That was the voicemail my sister left me at 2:37 in the morning. I didn't hear it until I woke up in a plastic hospital chair with a crick in my neck and my father's oxygen monitor beeping in the background. I had fallen asleep holding his hand. I checked my phone and saw 17 missed calls, a voicemail, and a banking notification that made my vision go white. $214,000. Gone. Not just gone, transferred. In 4 separate transactions between midnight and 2 a.m., while I sat in a cardiac ICU waiting to find out if my father was going to survive his second heart attack. I sat there for a moment, listening to the beeping, watching my father breathe through the mask, and I felt something shift inside me. Something quiet and cold, like a lock clicking shut. That money wasn't just savings. It was the last thing my grandmother ever gave us. She had spent 40 years working as a seamstress, stitching other people's curtains and wedding dresses. And when she died, she left every dollar she had ever saved split between the two of us. My father had been holding my half in a joint estate account, while I built my credit. It was supposed to cover a down payment on a house and a private oncology specialist for his treatment, because the one his insurance covered had a 14-week waiting list. I looked at the notification again. Then I listened to the voicemail again. You always got everything. This is just what you owed me. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from right now. I want to know who's out there with me tonight. You're probably asking the same question everyone asks when I tell this story. Why did you have a joint account with your sister in the first place? Why would someone who spends her days chasing insurance fraud let her own sister have access to $214,000? That's the right question. And the honest answer is that financial abuse inside a family doesn't begin with a theft. It begins with a story. And in our family, the story had been the same my entire life. My sister was the one who stayed. I was the one who left. She was 6 years older than me, and she had never moved more than 20 minutes from the house we grew up in. She married young, had 2 kids early, and when her mother got sick the first time, she was the one who drove her to appointments and sat in waiting rooms and answered the calls at midnight. By the time our mother passed, my sister had built a whole identity around being the person who sacrificed. She wore it like a medal. She brought it up at every holiday, every family dinner, every phone call that lasted more than 5 minutes. I had gone to college on a scholarship, gotten a job with a regional insurance company investigating fraud claims, and built something that looked, from the outside, like a comfortable life. I owned my car outright. I had a good credit score. I didn't struggle the way she did. And in our family, that was a moral failing. The logic was never spoken out loud, but it was always there, hanging in the air at Thanksgiving, embedded in little comments about how nice it must be to take vacations or sleep in on weekends. The unspoken agreement was this. My success was a form of abandonment, and the only way to balance the ledger was to keep paying into a debt I had never agreed to take on. The joint account was my father's idea, actually. He set it up 2 years ago when he got his diagnosis, because he didn't trust himself to manage the money alone while he was on the medications. He put my sister and me both on it, thinking that was the fair thing to do. The even thing. She had always handled the family finances, paid the bills, written the checks. He trusted her with everything. I should have said something then. I saw the way she looked at that account number when you read it out loud at the kitchen table. Not like it was a responsibility, like it was a reward, but I didn't say anything. Because I was tired of being called selfish. I was tired of the looks and the sighs and the phone calls where she would drop into her voice a certain exhaustion. That meant I had somehow failed her again without knowing how. I thought if I just kept showing up, kept contributing, kept being the easy one, eventually the debt would feel paid. I know better now. Some people will never mark the ledger closed, because the debt is not about money. It's about control, and you cannot pay your way out of someone else's need to keep you feeling guilty. I put the phone down. My father stirred in the bed and opened his eyes and looked at me, and for a second I almost told him. But his blood pressure was already unstable, and the cardiologist had been very specific about stress. Go home and sleep, he said, his voice rough from the tube they had removed that morning. I'm fine, I said. You look like you got hit by a truck, he said, and almost smiled. I squeezed his hand and told him I would be back in a few hours. I told him everything was fine. I walked to my car in the hospital parking garage, sat down in the driver's seat, and opened my laptop. My job had given me a very specific set of skills. I spent 40 hours a week, sometimes 60, pulling apart financial trails that people thought they had hidden. I knew how staged accident claims worked, how medical billing fraud worked, how people laundered small amounts across multiple accounts to avoid triggering automated flags. I was good at it because I was patient and because I had learned early that people who steal inside familiar systems always make the same mistake. They think their access makes them invisible. It doesn't. Access just means the trail starts closer to home. I logged into the estate account from my work portal and pulled the full transaction log with timestamps and device IDs. The 4 transfers had gone out in a pattern I recognized immediately, spaced 30 minutes apart, each one just under the $55,000 threshold that would have triggered an automatic hold. Someone had looked up the reporting limits. Someone had done their homework, or thought they had. The receiving account was a business account registered to something called Bright Path Consulting, LLC. I wrote the name down. Then I ran it through the same commercial registry database I use at work. Bright Path Consulting, LLC had been registered in the state 6 weeks ago. Listed agent, my brother-in-law. Registered address, their house. I sat with that for a minute. 6 weeks ago. She had opened the shell account 6 weeks ago. This was not a decision made in a panic. This was not a moment of weakness or desperation. She had planned this. She had watched my father get wheeled into cardiac surgery, and while our family was falling apart in a waiting room, she had been executing a plan she had built over a month and a half. I thought about calling her. I almost did. My hand was on the phone, and I had her contact open, and I just sat there, thumb hovering, thinking about all the versions of this conversation, and how every single one of them ended with her crying, her saying I had always made her feel like less, her saying I never understood how hard her life was, her turning it around until somehow I was the one apologizing for the money she had just stolen. I put the phone down. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it with today's date. I wasn't her sister right now. I wasn't her sister right now. I was an investigator with a subject in a file. The first thing I needed was proof of intent. In insurance fraud, the difference between an honest mistake and a crime is documentation of planning. And my sister had made her first mistake the moment she left that voicemail, because now I had her voice, time-stamped at 2047 a.m., saying you always got everything. This is just what you owed me. Which is not what someone says when they are confused about account access. That is what someone says when they believe they are entitled to what they took. I saved the voicemail file to the folder. The second thing I needed was to trace where the money went after it hit Bright Path Consulting. I pulled the business account routing number from the registry filing and ran it through a financial network tool I had legitimate access to through my employer. The account had been opened at a regional credit union. 3 of the 4 transfers had already been moved out again, this time to 2 separate accounts. One in my brother-in-law's name and one that flagged immediately in the system as associated with a debt collection company that had filed a lien against their property 8 months ago. So that was it. They were underwater. They owed money they couldn't pay, and my father's account was the solution they had found. That almost made it worse somehow. Not desperation, just arithmetic. They had added up their problem and my assets and decided the math worked out in their favor. I kept going. I needed to know what she knew about the timeline, meaning how long she thought she had before anyone noticed. I pulled up the family's shared cloud storage account, the one my father had set up years ago to share photos, where all of our contact numbers and calendars were still synced. My sister had never removed herself. She probably forgot it existed or thought I never checked it. I opened her calendar. She had blocked out this entire week as a trip. A long weekend starting tomorrow at a resort 4 hours away. 2 adults, 2 kids, spa package, premium cabin. Booked 3 weeks ago. Paid in full from a credit card I didn't recognize. She had booked the vacation before she executed the transfer. She had planned the theft, pre-purchased the celebration, and scheduled it for the window when she knew I would be at the hospital and distracted and least likely to check the account immediately. I took screenshots of everything. Calendar, booking confirmation email that had synced to the shared account, transaction logs, registry filing, debt lien record, voicemail file, evidence folder, dated, organized, sourced. Then I did something I had not planned on doing, but that turned out to be the most important step. I called my company's legal counsel, who I had worked with on dozens of cases, and who picked up on the second ring even though it was barely 7 in the morning. I have a situation, I said. It's personal. I need to know exactly what I can and cannot do with access I have through my work tools before I do anything else. She walked me through it for 45 minutes. What was admissible, what the exposure was for the business entity, what misappropriation of estate funds meant in civil terms versus what wire fraud and elder financial abuse meant in criminal terms. The last phrase was the one that landed hardest. My father was 63 years old, recovering from a cardiac event with an active cancer diagnosis, on medication that affected his cognition. Under state law, that made him a protected adult. And what my sister had done to his account had a specific name and a specific set of consequences. I thanked the attorney and ended the call. I sat in the parking garage for another minute. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere below me, a car alarm went off and then stopped. I thought about how many times I had let things slide. The time she had borrowed money to cover her property taxes and never mentioned it again. The time she told everyone at Christmas that she was the only one who really showed up for this family, while I sat across the table and said nothing. The time my father quietly told me that she had suggested I should contribute more to his care costs because I made a good salary, and I had just nodded and increased my automatic transfer. I had spent years trying to convince her I was not the enemy. I had paid a toll on a road that was never going anywhere. I picked up my phone and called her. She answered on the third ring, and her voice had that practiced steadiness that I recognized from years of difficult conversations. The voice that was already braced, already performing. "I've been trying to reach you," she said. "How's Dad?" "He's stable," I said. "They're moving him to a regular room today." "That's good," she said. She waited. "I saw the transfers," I said. I kept my voice flat, calm. I made it sound like confusion, just a little. "Something happened with the account. 4 transactions went out last night and I can't figure out what happened. My access was showing an error this morning. Did you get any alerts?" The pause was almost too short. She recovered fast. "No," she said. "I haven't checked it. I'll look this afternoon." "Can you look now?" I said. "I'm worried something's wrong. Dad doesn't know yet and I don't want him to find out while he's still in the hospital." Another pause. Slightly longer. "I'm sure it's fine," she said. "These things happen. Glitches. 2 and 14,000 doesn't just glitch," I said. Still even, still confused sounding. "I'll look into it," she said. "I'll come by later today and we can talk." "Okay," I said. "Come by the hospital. Dad would love to see you." She said she would. We hung up. I stayed in the parking garage. I wasn't confused. I wasn't panicking. I was watching the exact moment when she realized the problem and started calculating. She thought I was lost. She thought I would need her to explain it to me, to guide me through the process of trying to recover the money, to position herself as the helper while she delayed and deflected, and eventually let the trail go cold. She didn't know what I did for a living. Not really. She knew the title, fraud investigator. But she had always dismissed it the way she dismissed everything about my life that she couldn't fully picture. She thought I filed paperwork and made phone calls. She had never watched me dismantle a 20-transaction money trail built by someone who actually knew what they were doing. My sister was not someone who actually knew what they were doing. She showed up at the hospital at 4 in the afternoon. She came alone, without my brother-in-law, and she was wearing a calm face that I recognized as the one she wore when she had already decided how the conversation was going to go. She hugged me in the hallway. I let her. She looked in on my father, who was sitting up and in better color, and she held his hand for a while and they talked about nothing, about the nurses and the food, and whether the hospital had a decent parking situation. I stood near the window and watched. I kept my face soft. When he dozed off, she and I walked to the small family lounge at the end of the hall. She sat down. I sat across from her. She folded her hands on the table and looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as prepared grief. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you this," she said. I didn't say anything. "The account had a problem," she said. "I made some decisions that I'm not proud of. And I know it looks bad, but I need you to understand the situation I've been in. The house is in trouble. We've been drowning for over a year and I didn't want to tell you because you have enough going on with Dad. I thought I could handle it and pay it back before anyone noticed." "How much were you going to pay back?" I said. "All of it," she said quickly. "I swear, this was never meant to be permanent. It was a bridge. I just needed to stabilize things and then I was going to replace every dollar." "From where?" I said. She looked down. "My brother-in-law is starting a business. It's going to do well. We just needed capital." I looked at her for a moment. This woman who had called me at 2047 in the morning and left a voicemail telling me I had always gotten everything and the money was just what I owed her, was now sitting across from me describing a loan. A bridge. A temporary misunderstanding. "I have the voicemail," I said. The color in her face shifted. "I have the transaction logs with the device ID and the timestamp. I have the Bright Path Consulting registration, which I pulled from the commercial registry this morning. I have the lien filing on your house from 8 months ago. I have your resort booking confirmation that's synced to the family cloud account, and I have spoken with an attorney about what elder financial abuse looks like under state law." She opened her mouth. "Let me finish," I said. She closed it. "Dad is a protected adult under the statute. He was post-surgery and on cardiac medication when these transfers occurred. That changes what this is legally. It is no longer a family dispute about a shared account. It is a criminal exposure question." Her hands, still folded on the table, had gone rigid. "I have not filed anything yet," I said. "I want you to understand that I have everything I need to file a report today, and I want you to understand what I am choosing not to do right now and why." She found her voice. You would really do that to your own family? You took money set aside for Dad's cancer specialist, I said, to pay for a resort vacation. That's not. We needed to stabilize. You left a voicemail at 2:37 a.m. that says, and I am quoting, "You always got everything. This is just what you owed me." That is not someone who made a desperate mistake. That is someone who believes she was entitled to take what she took. She was crying now. The tears came fast, and she pressed her fingers to her mouth and she made a sound that I had heard many times over the years. The sound that had always made me step back and soften and look for the way to make it easier for her. I didn't step back. I need the money returned to the account by tomorrow morning, I said. All of it. Every dollar. I need confirmation from the credit union that the transfers have been reversed. I can't reverse all of it by tomorrow, she said. Some of it went to the debt company. That's a problem you need to solve, I said. I'll give you until the end of the week. If the full amount is not back in the account by Friday at noon, I file the Elder Financial Abuse Report with the state attorney's office, and I submit the documentation to the fraud division of the credit union. At that point, it is no longer in my hands. And if I do return it, she said, her voice had gone quiet, calculating again underneath the tears. Then we never speak of this again, I said. And by that I mean we never speak again. Period. You will not contact me. You will not contact my father about me. You will not involve yourself in his medical decisions or his finances in any capacity. You will remove yourself from the estate account. He's my father too. Then you should have thought about that at 2047 in the morning. She left the hospital without going back in to say goodbye to him. I sat in the family lounge for a while after she walked out, looking at the white wall and the plastic chairs and a framed print of a lighthouse that someone had hung there probably 10 years ago. I thought about all the years of small payments, all the ways I had tried to make her feel less threatened by my existence, all the apologizing for having a career, for having savings, for not needing to borrow money. I thought about how the debt had never gotten smaller no matter how much I paid into it, because the debt was never real. It was a mechanism. It was the way she kept me in a position where she had leverage over me and I had to keep earning my place. The account statement I had stared at that morning in the parking garage had done something the years of guilt trips never could. It had given me a number, a clear, specific, undeniable number that told me exactly what my membership in this version of my family cost. $214,000. Once you have the number, you can decide whether you want to keep paying. I had already decided. I went back in to sit with my father. He was watching a nature documentary with the sound low, and he looked at me when I came in and asked if I was okay, because he said I looked like I had made a hard decision. I'm okay, I said, getting clearer on some things. He nodded. He had always been perceptive in the way quiet people sometimes are. He watched the documentary. I sat next to him. Your sister called me, he said after a while. I waited. She said she made a mistake with the account. He kept his eyes on the screen. She didn't say what kind of mistake. She's going to fix it, I said. He was quiet for a moment. I should have been more careful about how I set things up. This isn't your fault. I wanted things to be fair, he said. I always wanted things to be fair between the two of you, and I don't think I ever managed it. You can't make fair out of thin air, I said. Some things just aren't fair from the start. He looked at me then, and I could see that he understood more than he was saying, and that he had perhaps understood more than he was saying for a long time. I'm going to get you in with the specialist, I said. The one at the university hospital. I'm going to call Monday morning and I'm going to tell them whatever I need to tell them to move you up the list. That costs. I know what it costs, I said. It's covered. Don't worry about it. He squeezed my hand once and went back to watching his documentary, and neither of us said anything else about it. By Friday at 11:47 in the morning, the full amount had been returned to the account. 4 deposits, ugly and irregular, made in pieces across the week, scraped together from whatever sources she had access to. I did not ask how. I confirmed the balance, documented the restoration, and removed her access credentials from the estate account. I never filed the report. I didn't need to. The purpose of the threat was not punishment. The purpose was to reclaim something she had spent years telling me I didn't have. The right to protect what was mine without apologizing for it. My father started with the specialist 6 weeks later. The treatment protocol they put him on was more aggressive than what the insurance plan had offered and considerably more targeted to his specific markers. He lost some weight and some hair, and he was tired in a way I had not seen before. But 3 months into the treatment, his numbers began to move in the right direction. Slowly, carefully, in the direction of better. She and I have not spoken. She has not tried, and I have not wanted her to try. There is no version of a conversation that ends somewhere useful. I know what she believes about me, and I know it will not change. And I have made a kind of peace with the fact that someone can have grown up in the same house as you, eaten at the same table, shared the same memories, and still be a stranger in every way that matters. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty, if I miss her. I miss the sister I thought she was for most of my life. The one I constructed out of obligation and wishful thinking, and the peculiar loyalty you extend to people simply because they were there first. I do not miss the person she actually was. You cannot miss something you never really had. What I have now is quieter than before, less noise, less performance, less careful management of someone else's feelings about my choices. I go to work. I call my father every night. On Sundays, I drive up and we have coffee on his back porch, and he tells me about the birds that come to the feeder he hung on the railing, and I tell him about the week, and neither of us mentions the thing that happened last spring. He is doing better. Not well, not yet, but better. That is enough. That is more than enough. Some people stay in your life because they belong there. Some people stay because you have convinced yourself that keeping them costs less than losing them. I spent 30 years paying a price I never agreed to, because I was afraid of what the silence would feel like if I stopped. It feels like mornings with nowhere to be. It feels like a bank account that means what it's supposed to mean. It feels like my father's voice on the phone at 7 in the evening, telling me the red cardinal came back. It feels like something I did not know I was allowed to have. The hardest thing about protecting your own life is that sometimes the people standing between you and it are the ones you grew up believing you could never live without. And then one day you understand that the person you couldn't live without was never really there. You were only keeping the seat warm for someone you hoped would eventually show up. You are allowed to stop waiting. You are allowed to close the account. If any part of this story sounds like your story, I want you to hear this. The debt is not real. The guilt is not a moral obligation. The money you have spent trying to earn your place in rooms where you were always already welcome has not been wasted, because it taught you the exact price of a piece that was never on offer. Now you know. And now, like me, you can decide what to do with the number. Drop a comment below and tell me whether you've ever felt like you were paying a toll to exist in your own family. And if this story meant something to you, stay with us here at Aura Flourish, because we're just getting started.